Boys, we're looking at changing the subject of formulas today. The subject of a formula is the variable which stands alone on one side of the equal sign, usually the left-hand side. For example, in the formula here, C equals 2 pi r. Circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius. C is the subject of that formula. It's on the left-hand side there on its own, one of one lot of C. Now, every formula can be rearranged to make another variable the subject. For example, if we make r the subject of this formula, then we'd get this. So it's the same relationship between the different variables, except C is the subject here, and r is the subject here. Okay, so let's do some examples of changing the subject in formulas. Okay, so we've got to make x the subject in each of the following. Y equals ax plus b. Alrighty, so to get x by itself, we're going to subtract b off both sides. So we get y minus b equals ax. We're then going to divide by a on both sides. And so we get y minus b over a equals x. So x is now the subject of that formula. X equals y minus b all over a. Alright, the second one, making x the subject, we're going to multiply by x. So you notice I'm multiplying by pronumerals here rather than just numbers. And we can of course do that. They just operate in the same way as numbers would. Okay, so you get xy equals a. Now I'm going to divide by y. So we get x equals a over y. C. Y equals ax squared. Alright, first thing, we're going to get x on its own, so we're going to divide by a, the coefficient of x. So we get y over a equals x squared. Next thing we're going to do now is square root both sides. And so we're going to get y over a square rooted, and we're going to plus or minus that. And that's going to be equal to x. Because we know with quadratics, we're going to get both the plus and the minus version. And so there we go, x equals plus or minus the square root of y on a. Moving on to D, making x the subject, multiplied by y, first step. So mx plus n equals now y times n. Subtract n off both sides, so we get mx equals yn minus n. And then we're going to divide by m. Okay, x is the subject. So we've got a couple more, and there'll be a little trick that we're going to need to get our answer in E. So you notice in E, there's two terms with the x in it. And so we're going to have to be a bit clever here to get x alone. And the skill we're going to use is factorizing. So if we factorize the right-hand side, we're going to get y equals x a minus b. And that's clever now because it means I can now divide by, so we're going to divide by the whole thing a minus b. And so that's going to just give us y over a minus b equals x, or x equals y over a minus b, which is what we required, x the subject. F, this time we're going to square both sides. So we're going to get v squared equals x minus u. and then add u to both sides, we're going to get b squared plus u equals x, or x equals v squared plus u. Two left. Question 2, we want to make r the subject of this equation here. So to do this, we can, if we multiply each of our parts of this, like we did in equations earlier in the topic, if we multiply each part by r, then that's going to be able to get r off the denominator there. So if we multiply through by r, we're going to get r over x equals r over r plus r over s. Okay, r over r is just 1, so really we've got r over x equals 1 plus r over s. But we've still got that same issue with the two terms here, and so it may well just be easier for us to multiply all the way through by x and s to cancel that out. So let's just go back and rework it, because that's going to be faster. So if we multiply let's just keep going with where we're at, because we can't actually get there. So let's move this r over s term to the right hand side. So we're going to get rx minus rs equals 1. Now if we factorize the common r in both of those, we're going to get r outside of 1 over x minus 1 over s equals 1. So now we can just divide by all of that. So we get r equals 1 over x minus 1 over s. Now it's not that pretty. So if we choose to, we could combine that and keep going. But r is the subject of this equation, so that is also sufficient. Question 3. Make b the subject. We can square both sides. We're going to get x squared equals b squared minus 4ac. We're now going to plus 4ac to both sides. So we get x squared plus 4ac equals b squared. And square root both sides. So we get square root plus or minus x squared plus 4ac equals b. So b equals plus or minus the square root of x squared plus 4ac. Done. So that's changing the subject of formulas.